So today we're going to, the topic will be studying Dharma books with Sangha. We have here at SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, have a daily book study schedule with the temple residents, and which means people who live here, both ordained and not ordained, and also have, I think there's, so here's all the books here, and we're going to talk about some of these, but basically they're Dharma books from lots of different parts of the teaching, including Dzogchen of Longchenpa, and then Khenpo Sochim Jamso's Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness, right on down through the Samdi Nirmachana Sutra, and so on. And we changed these for a while. We spent over a year studying what was the Buddhist? The Majjhima Nikaya, the part of the Agamas. And we didn't get very far, but we just kept going over and over that material, trying to sink down into it. And that's the idea. Interesting thing about studying Dharma books is if you read them on your own, like I did so many years ago, I didn't really have anybody to talk to about the book. And so I remember reading Meditation in Action and Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism by my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, in 1973, and really not really being able to sink into it. I found that by reading it over and then coming back and reading it again, even though it felt kind of silly at the time, because I thought, like so many people do, well, I've already read that book. Why wouldn't I go to another book? But for some reason, I really liked him. I liked what he had to say. And reading what he had to say over and over again seemed to be very, very helpful. And then starting a book study or meditation group, Dharma study group in 1975, just to give you a little bit of history, I started working with people as a group, as a facilitator, not teaching, but just sit down with the book and read a little bit, discuss it. And I found out over the years of doing that once or twice a week for several decades, that it seemed to be very, very helpful in ways that are difficult to see in advance. One of the things that this does is it brings Sangha, or the community of people, one of the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It's a way that brings people, the Sangha, or the community of people who are studying the truth the Buddha taught, together, to be able to work on that together and study that, reflect on it, and go deeper down into it. The tendency for anybody, there's different ways of some, basically saying that what you're doing is wrong. But the tendency is to skim over the material. And when I say that, I'm not saying you don't understand, that you couldn't repeat it, you couldn't even possibly paraphrase it, but still going over the material with others and working on this material with others, to not just because you know so much and you can bring them up to your incredible level of insight, but so that you're actually working with people. So you find that by doing that people have that talking with people about the material who are wired differently than you are tends to really help a lot, and it really strengthens Buddhist community, the community of people who are trying to understand this teaching. So when we separate and we go back to our cushions and do our solitary meditation all by ourselves, then that is combined with the other combination is talking to the teaching person, studying the material, and then spending time just strengthening the awareness practice. This seems to be very, very powerful and helps in so many ways. And I often say, I have said, and I've said in a couple page, what is that? What do we call that?
Facilitator's guide.
Kind of a facilitator's guide that I've slowly built up over several years, that basically tells you or instructs you or shows you how to conduct that in such a way that you don't interfere with someone's need to misunderstand. And yes, you didn't misunderstand what I said. I I said, we have a need to not know, because if you immediately start to teach someone based on your relative understanding, you actually get in the way of their understanding. We have to really allow people, we have to respect people and allow them to have their misconceptions, or whatever, however you want to say it. So we bring people along at their own speed. We do bring them along, but first of all, they have to have a little bit of effort. People are always asking me about that word. How can you do this without pushing or whatever? And I say, just set up a schedule. It's time to study. We study here every day at SokukoJi, every day at noon, except for Saturday we study at 11, and Sunday we do this. So this is the shortest practice day, a couple of hours. The rest of it's off. So, and then on a couple of days we study twice a day. And like on Saturday we study. We're studying this Samdhi Namrachana. We're studying Samdhi Namrachana Sutra. 3 different translations of it: the Keenan translation, the Thomas Cleary translation, and the John Powers translation. And using all of those together is very, very helpful to see what that incredible teaching that is one of the foundation teachings of Chan and Zen Buddhism from the 3rd, 4th century, So what I like to say is that, contrary to what the way a lot of things are taught, you need to understand and be able to pass tests and everything. We don't have tests. Testing somebody on anything is more about you and your merchandising mentality. Even when I went to Vajradhatu Seminary, they had kind of oral tests where I think I sat down with 3 other people and a nuclear physicist. What's that guy's name? A nuclear physicist. Somebody will tell me pretty quick. They're thinking about it right now. So I've written several books. His name doesn't come to me right now, which a lot of names are not appearing anymore. So I think everything's getting a little bit weak in the memory department. So, but what I'm trying to point out here, something that is quite often missed, is when you study something, you go into the material and you repeat it, and you go over, you slow way down, you read it word for word, you have a dictionary, have a Sanskrit dictionary if you need one, and actually look and find out what those words mean. Don't necessarily fall prey to the idea of a preconception that, well, you already know what that means. You may not. You may find that the word that you've been using all along, like, what is that word? The word you've been using all along is really not exactly what you thought it meant. There's several words that are common words that are really easy to misunderstand what they mean. So the idea is to go very slow, and the facilitator, usually Unyo, here's Unyo, and she's also my wife, and she is usually here for to facilitate book studies, but quite often other people, other residents, Senshu and Shokan. I think Mado, you haven't yet. Chazan has. Carol, you have or not? So the idea that anyone can do this, it's just a matter about what your function when you do that is to actually be aware of what's happening between people and help people connect around the Dharma. When you're sitting and reading something, you're trying to help everyone go down into that material. So it takes a while because everyone's level is different and everyone's ability to conceptualize what they just heard is much different. Sometimes people are incredibly good at reading something and just paraphrasing it. But then if you talk to them about how they feel about their practice, their life and so on, they're not doing so well. They're just extremely good at handling concepts. We all know about this. And there are other people that aren't maybe so good about handling concepts, but the depth of their insight, pretty amazing sometimes. These people go unnoticed. I'm not going to compliment them other than what I just did. So it's necessary to have a form, just like you need a time to sit. You need a time to sit. You need to pick out a book. The one I recommend for anyone who's beginning is Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. You can't find a better book. Not that I've read all the thousands of Dharma books that are out there. I'm sure there's another wonderful book that I've totally missed that somebody's thinking about right now. So, but the idea is to, how do we use the concepts to get us down into the structure of the mind, the way passion, aggression, and ignorance works, the way the 5 skandhas work, the way the 6 realms work, and how we interface with the 6 realms, how the 5 skandhas go into the 6 realms and operate in terms of the 12 links in the chain of existence, or the 12 nidanas, to see how all of those things that have been pointed out by the Buddha and other teachers down through the centuries, to see that and go down into that and see how does that produce an apparent singularity we call me, which is in the teachings is saying it's untrue. There is no singularity. There's something here, but it's not a singularity. Excuse me. It's many facets, many aspects, and they're coming and going. They're changing. You cannot keep track of anything. Of course, if you can, then you should let me know, so I'll be corrected. So another way of saying this is, I've told this to not only to to myself, which I needed to do years ago. When somebody leaves the study group, it is not a problem if they don't understand what just occurred. The lack of understanding around material is still awareness. Awareness trumps everything. This isn't something that's mentioned a lot, but awareness trumps everything. It trumps language, it trumps information, it trumps everything, because things are changing so rapidly, and they are changing so completely that if you're locked down on an idea, world is going on. True eternity still flows, as it says in Sandokai. Even though you got it, but true eternity is still flowing. And of course, eternity doesn't flow. But if you realize that, then you see eternity flows. You have to actually see that yourself. This is why we're doing this. This is why people sit and look like a bunch of dodos sitting looking at the wall to the rest of the world. But they're not. They're actually sitting and strengthening their awareness and training their minds to see what is fundamentally true. It's not a belief system. This is about seeing what is true so you can see it. So you don't need to even listen to me or anybody else. You probably will. You'll probably listen to a lot of people. Maybe listen better than you've ever listened. Your whole job may be listening. Until it's not. So I have Unyo here, since she facilitates the study of these. Could you go through these books and just say a little bit about each one and where we're at or what we're doing there? And then people can also, when we get around to questions, people can ask questions of you also.
Yes, and I would like to say that if anybody would like to have a copy of the list and the days that we study, because we do have a free conference line, call-in line. It's free to us, but you would want to check with your service provider to see if you've got limited minutes. But you're welcome to call in and join our discussion group. And there are a number of the books that are online and are free. So some of the texts are not. That's not the case. But it's just a great way. We have people calling in from both coasts. Shane often calls in from California. We've got Sokuzan up in Traverse. Just a lot of different people who have been here who have called in, and we really invite that. So please, we study, as Sokuzan said, every day from noon until 1 p.m. Many times, like yesterday, in our late study, we studied the Buddhist Yoga, which is the Samdi Nirmachana Sutra. This is Thomas Cleary's course. We actually study that twice a day, on Saturdays at 11 until noon, and then we do it again from 3 until 4. And we actually went till 5 o'clock yesterday. We had really gotten into a part.
2 translations of that.
So this is the probably the Cleary translation, and then this is also, this is the John Keenan, the scripture on the explication of underlying meaning, and then the Orange Book or Wisdom of the Buddha, which is the John Powers translation. So we take a look at all three.
All the same sutra.
All the same sutra, the Samdhinirmacchana Sutra, and we take a look at these three different translations just to give us an idea of how different translators over the years have interpreted different words, and it's quite helpful to do that. And we always, whenever we have a new person, we try to summarize where we've been, but it doesn't really matter if we even start the book all over again. And it's kind of an unusual sense, at least that's how I've experienced it. And people that have worked with me as a facilitator for some length of time kind of chuckle when I say, well, let's just start the chapter over. We've got, a couple of new people, and it would be just as easy to start over. And you can't ever do anything twice. So there is a difficulty in trying to, at least for me, trying to summarize exactly what the text is about. But as Sokuzan said, the Samdhinirmacchana Sutra is one of the early texts and sutras that we've studied. Of course, Buddhist yoga, the word yoga can be interpreted different ways. Here on the back cover of the book, it talks about, it says it's meditation, method, or union. A discipline is another word that could be translated.
And we've also studied, went through the Lankavatara Sutra, which is also foundation text for Zen and Chan, twice in a study here. And they finished it once, and I said, okay, start over. And I got a lot of frowns. I said, start over and go through it again. You were here for that. No, you were here for that.
Yeah, Burley, yeah.
And Burley was here. So the idea is to just go down deeply into the material, and you'll find that it's always changing. If it's not really changing, but it's always your perception of the book is somewhat static. But on the other hand, your ideas about that and the way we perceive things. So please go ahead and.
So anyway, that's Saturday. But then let's start with Monday. Mondays we study progressive stages of meditation on emptiness. Excuse me, that's the evening. We have a lot of books. So at lunchtime, at noon, we study natural perfection, and this is Longchenpa's Radical Dzogchen. And I think everyone who has attended this study or participated in it, we all have kind of a
14th
century monk. I call him a poet. Sounds like a poem, but he's just so I don't know. Somehow there's a warmth to his writing, and we once again read very slowly, and which is the beauty of this way of studying too, is that anyone can stop at any time. We try to get at least enough text read to get a sense of what's going on, but we invite people to stop, ask questions. Let's look up a word, as Sokuzan was saying, simple words that we all think we know, like, well, what is passion? Or what is aggression? What is ignorance? How is it used? So those can all be questioned from multiple dictionaries too. But so natural perfection is, again, it's more of a Tibetan text, but which doesn't really matter. It's still a, extremely valuable. I'm just going to read one thing.
Cutting through is not here, but that's another.
Oh, we can get it.
Thank you.
When we talk about or Sokuzan talks about how we get glued to our concepts, we just on Thursday we're reading from Longchenpa in the section called Resolution and Absence. And there's one stanza that just really lit up for me, and so I want to share it with you. He says, so reality is primordial purity, yet the babes who are careless of that stay attached to their various ideas and opinions. What mania to believe in concrete ideas. How sad to believe in an I that is actually absent. How disheartening to make an argument out of nothing. How we love those fervent believers, eternal migrants in samsara. So that was our Thursday. So this is Monday noon and Thursday noon. So that was the text that we were contemplating and discussing on Thursday.
So this is not an advertisement, it's not a promotion. This is just an announcement. So we're not, don't do anything unless you have to. If you don't have to tune in, watch Netflix, do something else. But if you're looking for a connection with this kind of material, then this is a pretty good place to study this, especially a book like this, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, which I've been through countless times by myself and with others, written in a compilation of talks by Trungpa Rinpoche, given at Karma Choling, used to be called Tail of the Tiger in 1971 and 2, I think. And then they brought those talks together. And so it's just it just lays out the Buddhist teachings in a way, and it isn't it's, of course, it's Vajrayana or it's Tibetan or it's Tantric Buddhism. Doesn't matter. Buddhism is taught in lots of different ways. There's no right or wrong way to teach it.
So just back to the schedule. So Monday night, then, we study Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness by Khenpo Tsultrim Gyaltsen Rinpoche. And this text we also study at noon on Tuesday. So it's maybe you would like to say something. You've read this several times.
Yeah, this is one that Khenpo, this book was first given to me by Steve Tibbetts in Minneapolis many years ago, and thought I should read this. So he was right. And I've been reading it ever since, off and on by myself and with others. And it's just progressive stages of meditation on emptiness. It just takes you through the various ways of looking at emptiness using the schools of Buddhism. And one of the things that Khenpo, I think, either told Steve Tibbetts this, or Steve Tibbetts told me that he told one of his students this. I don't know. Steve would have to correct me. That when he gave him the book, he said, "Read this 10 times." And I thought, I like that. That's I feel the same way. If you actually, if a book is really, if someone through realization has taken the time to put things in words so that you can have a taste or a flavor of that realization through reading those words, probably should read them a few times. Or you should listen to them a few times. Just like anything we want to learn, that especially things that we want to learn that are very difficult to step out of the conceptual area into the actual realization part of it. This is what Longchenpa is so good at doing. And in Zen, this is called stepping off the 100-foot pole. You will go up 100 feet studying everything, but at some point you have to leave everything you've studied. It's a good idea if you've really, really studied, because if you haven't really, really studied, you won't be able to step off that 100-foot pole. That's not a prediction.
So Monday night and Tuesday noon, progressive stages. Then Tuesday night is cutting through, as Sokuzan said. And of course, in the evening studies, we start at 7. We sit from 7 until about 5 to 8. And then we begin our study at 8 o'clock until 9 or shortly after. So then on Wednesday, we jokingly call it Dogen Day. So we're studying the Shobogenzo, Treasury of the True Dharma, I, by Dogen Zenji. So we're on page 6. We've been studying since September on this particular with these particular books. So it's very slow going and good. So
Who's
then
the translator of that one?
This Shobogenzo is translated or edited by Kazuaki Tanahashi. And this is a book that is not online. So you would want to, if you want a hard copy, you purchase this. We have just 2 copies here. I think the book sells for around $40 or $50 on Amazon. So, and if you do buy it, be sure and do smile.amazon.com. And here's a little ad
That is a
yeah. Whenever you're buying through Amazon now, we're on there as a 501c3, and so a 0.5% of your purchases go towards supporting SokukoJi. So anyway, that's Wednesday, and then as I mentioned, Thursday we're back to our friend Longchenpa. Then on Friday, we all get out our hard hats. And we're reading Buddhist Phenomenology. This is by Dan Lusthouse, and I'll let you mention.
Yeah, this is I asked Red Pine through an email a while back, who we've studied several of his books. This translation of the Lankavatara Sutra is incredible. The commentary in there is just amazing. It's an amazing commentary, and we're going to go through that again. So we're not done with Lankavatara. And then we also studied his translations of the Diamond Sutra, which we were doing for a long period of time, and also the Heart Sutra. And we actually chant his translation of the Heart Sutra here every night in English. So we do that every night, but Sunday night. So I asked him about Yogacara. I said, can you recommend something on Yogacara Buddhism that really goes into it conceptually, so that we can, buy some hard hats? And he did. He even kind of warned me. I can't remember what he said, but it was kind of like, well, if you really want to do this. But he kind of said that this was early, and I think Mr. Lusthouse, isn't he a Harvard scholar? It seems like it. I don't know what he's. It doesn't matter what his credentials are. It's just that it's a really powerful handling of the concepts, intellect, using even going into Western philosophy, Husserl, and who's the other? Merleau-Ponty, and so on. And using their, and then he's going to do some other ones too, bring some other ones in as we go along. So it's a very good way to use conceptual dynamics, which I'm not particularly good at. I don't consider myself a scholar, but it's really good to take someone who really is a scholar and go in and actually use, use your awareness practice to go down into this material and see how that shows up for you. It's always about awareness. It's never about getting anywhere. It's just if you understand that, then all of your muscles relax all over, including the ones right around your frontal lobe. So that's a good one. Of course, Dan Lusthouse is probably not awake. Of course he's awake. Everybody's awake. Have we covered all the books?
Yes.
Okay, are there questions here in the peanut gallery? Yes, Shoka.
There are a lot of Dharma books out there available to read. So how did you come across these ones for your students?
Reading a lot of books. I read a lot. When I read a book, I always start with the index and the glossary and the bibliography. I want to know what they're. It's not a novel. Of course, a novel I also start at the end of the novel. And it's rare to find another person that does that. There's no such thing as a spoiler for me. What's going to spoil? So I go back and look at it that way, and I might just go by the glossary or the index and see what they're talking about. This is not just because they set a book aside doesn't mean it's wrong or it's bad or it's not good teaching something, but it just tells me something about the teaching, and it doesn't mean that if they don't have an index, that's a bad book. It just means they don't have an index. So it's harder to maybe get an idea. But if you look at the index of a book, it's just an interesting area to go and look. So like I said, this one was given to me by Steve Tibbetts. That I think he said you should read this. Natural Perfection. He's very interested in Longchenpa and have been for a long time, and just went into Amazon and found everything I could find on Longchenpa, and then I read quite a few reviews. It's a nice thing about Amazon is you can find reviews, and then if you find a review that's negative by somebody, go into and see what else they've reviewed. That'll tell you, because quite often if it's a very negative review, they may have never reviewed a book like this before. and they don't even read books like this, but they read this book and it's negative. But if you go in and you find, there's an even-handedness, they've actually, it looks like this is an educated person we're talking to, a sophisticated person, then you might put a little bit of credibility to that review. But generally speaking, I think, to come back to your question, I think you just have to read the book or read quite a bit of the book to get a feeling for it. And then sometimes I just put my hand on it and go, yep. So, and I'm very interested in going different directions, like going into the completely philosophical approach of Dan Lusthaus, and then also going back to the texts of the founder of our lineage, Dogen Zenji, Eihei Dogen Zenji. See, we could just be studying that. He has two or three volumes like this. Besides the Shobogenzo, there's also the other. I'm not going to remember the title of it, but it's another thick volume of teachings of his that even though he died fairly young, 20 or 53. He apparently awakened when he was with his teacher Rujing in China, and when he was in his early 20s. An unusual spiritual genius, you might say. So other than that, I don't know, any other questions along that line?
I have another question. You talk about sinking down into the teachings.
Yes.
Can you talk more about how you do that?
Yeah, if you're sinking down to the teachings, it feels like you're not getting it, but you don't stop studying it. So you keep studying it, and when you sink down into it, it means that you've actually started to leave the conceptual framework that the teachings show up as. If you're clinging to if you think you know what you're reading, then you're not sinking. It really is. It really is a sinking below the conceptual structure that you actually are studying. So if you say form is emptiness, emptiness is form, the same is true of feeling, perception, concept, or memory and consciousness. This is a Heart Sutra. And if you read that and you know what that means, that's not quite it. So, but if you read it again, you might be better off to read the actual mantra, gone, completely awake, so be it. Or falling apart, collapsed, nothing to do. So to understand that is to actually leave the comfort of conceptual understanding. But it takes a while to do that. You have to actually go through the concepts and see that some people actually want to just ride on the surface of the concept because it's like knowing stuff. I know, I got that down. You've heard that said before. It's like what's the joke? The guy, I can't remember his name. This is a great joke. We'll see if it's funny. He says, yeah, they had a 3-day sesshin or a 5-day sesshin at my temple the other day. I went in an hour. I nailed it. And had lunch. I nailed it. So. But there are people that, they sound funny, there are people who function that way. The extreme self-centeredness or narcissism is very much about knowing this and knowing this is true and that's false. This is an extreme duality. But sometimes we have to see that for a while until we're able to finally and fundamentally see what? Not separate. It's not separate. This is very respectful way of seeing the world, because you're no longer judging or condemning anything. Even really negative stuff gets a fair shake from you. You really are able to see the causes and conditions that lead. The people are having difficulty because they're suffering, not because they're mean people. They may look awful mean. So studying these books, the idea this may change, but probably we're going to go on like this. We may pull one out and put something else in as we go along. And the other thing we do in our book study is, if I'm here, might have an hour of book study, and then I stay out of there. Otherwise, I start saying stuff and confuse everybody further. So I stay out of there so people can actually interact around the book material. Because if I come in and I start talking, and so that first 40, 50 minutes of people studying Sangha, studying, and then I come in right at the end and then maybe answer some questions or something that has come up. And that seems to be a fairly good formula. Would you comment on that, how that works?
I think it works very well, and it really gives us a chance as Sangha to tackle the material ourselves. It's easy to defer to a teacher and say, well, this is the person that has the answer I really want to hear. And we struggle sometimes. It's just...
Yeah, can I comment on that?
Yeah.
Because sometimes people will say, well, I'll just ask Sokuzan about that. No, you should discuss that with the Sangha and see if it shifts a little bit, see if it changes. Not that you shouldn't ask me, or we can have to talk about it, but first actually bring those kind of questions to the Sangha so other people can, so you're actually sharing where you're at in your understanding with others, and then other people say, you are asking the kind of question you're asking. That's why questions are so important. It's very difficult to get someone who's used to making statements all the time to actually stop it. Ask a question. If you ask a direct question, you'll get an amazingly direct answer, because I can't do otherwise. But if you ask a complicated question, either I'll make fun of you, or I'll say I don't know, or ask me later, or what else? What other options do I have? If it gets really complicated, I'll say, what is your question? And it's not to be mean, it's to help the person. Or I might say, paraphrase yourself. If a person can paraphrase themselves pretty clearly, they're probably ready to hear that, because this means they've contemplated this enough that the dilemma or the lack of understanding, or however you want to say it, in a particular area it's been looked at enough that it can change its shape and still hold the same kind of inquiry. Then you could probably, yes, Lisa.
We were joking earlier about cheating and reading ahead. Is there anything counterproductive about, glancing at the material?
Yeah, I would say that's very good. I would say that would be up to you. I would trust you to do, but what I do, the way I handle that is I say I give everybody permission to not read ahead. Don't read ahead. I used to read ahead when I was first doing this 30 years ago, whatever it was, 40 years ago. And then I realized it's better for me to study it with people. If they're studying it, why shouldn't I study it too? And of course, it would change over time as I would get to know the material more and more. After a few years of doing the same book, you understand it. But since you've already taken that position of being with the people, then then you're with the people that are studying rather than being the teaching person. It's easy to turn into a teacher if you think you know stuff. That's why I often say don't teach unless you have to. So in your situation, you're reading ahead, or Carol's read ahead on some stuff, I think. I don't think there's any problem with it, but you don't have to. You could actually come in without ever buying any of these books and just read it with the Sangha. And then you would see, as you did that, that's why I say awareness rules. If you come in and you do that, then your awareness, then you can see whether you need to do that or not. Everyone is so different. Some people may need to do that. The only thing I think everybody needs to do is sit down and face a wall a lot. I have yet to find somebody that I can say, oh, you don't need to meditate. You're fine. You don't meditate. Whoa, all right. I'm ready to teach. Yeah, well, tell people stuff. Yes. Senchu.
How can someone who doesn't tend to move through things conceptually participate in book study?
I've already talked about that. And I would say, ask the people who are conceptual to explain themselves. Put them on the spot. you're sitting there and you're not, your understanding is just as clear as anyone else's, but you don't, not to pick on you, but you don't convert things into concepts like other people do. And that's why you're able to stay in your intuition. You're in your intuition most of the time. A lot of people, they're not sure what that is. They think that's being a dummy or not knowing. Whereas you're lucky. You didn't get an intellectual magnet in the front of your brain that sucks everything into concepts just when something happens. I think you would like to do that. Am I correct? But what we say is we participate with people and say when someone starts to explain any of these, explain the Heil in Dan Lusthouse, draw it out. I mean, like, pick on Mado. Mado is a PhD in philosophy. Who are you going to ask? Ask her about it. Of course, she's been told not to teach when she's here, but she's not doing too bad. I haven't learned much from her, so. She has a good sense of humor. But the idea is some people are wired more that way. There's no right or wrong to it. There's no right, there really is not. It really is not. Some people that's the only way they can approach it is through an intellectual, shredding things apart using concepts. And I think that's good. Just sit a lot so that there's a lot of air in those concepts, because otherwise everything gets stuffed together and we start becoming a fundamentalist. Kind of a personal fundamentalist. I know, and you don't, and you should just, do what I say, or believe what I believe, or think what I think. So I would say in your situation, going back to your original question, is all your physical presence, your body language, everything. Don't miss body language. Don't interpret it, because that's when you leave. That you look at the body language. Well, that means the person's defensive or blocked off. You don't do that. You just look at it. Everything, it will take care of itself. As long as you're there, that means you're in this physical world. And quite often the person who is conceptual, not in every case, but quite often they actually move slightly out of their body to do that. And then they collapse back in and look around to see if you got what they said. More.
Thank you.
Something else that I've observed myself is just the amount of respect that this style of study has. At least that's how I've experienced it, where it usually in a group like this, the temptation is for everybody to kind of find an understanding, and we all agree, but it becomes very challenging to perhaps speak in the group with a question or an insight and not have any response from anybody else. It's just like dead silence. And then to watch what the mind does in that situation, it's like, oh my gosh, did I just say something stupid? Does anybody, it just leaves you hanging there with your own situation. And that's just a tremendous amount of respect for needing to do this yourself and on behalf of everybody, we all get the chance to not to have to walk out of here agreeing with everybody else. So there's no consensus.
I also want to say, if we can do some more questions. I mean, it's noon already, but we can move on a little bit. I'd like to say that we have, if anybody wants this email to Unyo, if you want to be sent a copy of this. The next book we put out, we're going to put that book study guide in there. All it's really doing, the technique there, the protocol for it, just slows you way down. So you actually read word for word. And it's, I think everybody really appreciates it. A little irritating to go back and read something you've already read, Like the awareness there is, I know I didn't understand that. And I know I'm not going to understand it again. So why would I read it again? Yeah.
Are there any questions?
Cool. Let me check again.
Did you go into it?
I got your
Oh, let's see.
most of it.
Everybody already knows stuff.
Like I said.
Oh, and I wanted to address Maria Bardoska's.
Yes.
Maria, I know you're watching. I think you're watching, but I will talk to you personally. The questions you're asking are particularly, I would want that response to go to you rather than to be a general, because it doesn't apply to everyone else, but it applies to you. So, you can, we can, I Skype with some of my students, so we can do that at some point. They're good questions. It's just that the context for them is not available here in this kind of a talk.
We have a lot of people online. So we have Jeremy from Portland, Oregon, Sandru, Butmi is on, Kozan, William Murray, Kelly, Anna Maria, Christy.
That's
So
a nice.
it's good to have all of you.
Christy's on there?
Uh-huh.
Christy, where are you? Get down here. I'll send you a, let's see, bus ticket. It's good. So that's Sangha. That's people coming together and do this together. So no questions, though, right?
There may be one, let's see. Okay, here's a question from
Yeah.
Dora. She says, toward the end of Cutting Through, Chogyam mentions the need to work through stages such as surrendering.
Yes.
And discovering self-deception, a sense of humor, and so on before being ready for later practices like ruthless compassion. Is it helpful for a reader to focus on rereading one chapter, such as the one on surrendering repeatedly until they feel they have understood enough to move to the next concept?
So, Dora, what I would say immediately is study this with somebody else. Study it if you have Dharma friends or Dharma, if you have a teacher. I don't know what your situation is. But do that, or you can also call in. Like I said, it's not just an announcement. It's not an advertisement. You can also call into this every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern time, and study this material. And we move around in the book. If somebody wants to talk about some part of the chapter, I have no problem moving to that and discussing that material. Studying it with people and studying it over and over again, yes, this is true. And you have to remember that Trungpa Rinpoche was a Vajrayana, a tantric master. And so if you were to study in that tradition, you would need to do their forms, and their forms are extremely regulated. So you would have to do 4 foundation practices and a whole lot of complicated creation completion practices. I'm not saying you shouldn't do those, but you could also read this material and spend time strengthening the awareness. So when you come back, when you keep bringing, think about awareness is invisible, also doesn't belong to anybody, it's not an object. So it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. I can say that one more time, it's pretty amazing. But especially when you begin to see that every time you read something is different, you can't read any of these books, but that one in particular, you cannot read the introduction to Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism and ever have it mean the same thing. It's always changing. And what is changing? Your mind. Your mind, or what we call the mind. What doesn't change? The awareness you bring to it. And the identity slowly changes its allegiance from the propaganda of ego over to the reality and the truth of Dharmakaya, Buddha nature. It takes time. We have to look at the confusion, like you mentioned there in your question, and commenting on what the book said. We have to look at the self-deception. Oh, it's painful to continually come and look at how much we deceive ourselves over and over and over again. And then there's some kind of a breakthrough, either gradual or all at once, or maybe it just it's like sitting in a fog bank. I think it was Suzuki Roshi that talked about you walk in the field until eventually your robes are soaking wet. You don't even know when they got so wet, but you just slowly collected all of the reality of that, just start to soak into you, and you just find that where you used to find yourself, there's no one there anymore, and you don't mind. You don't mind there, and if you need a self, one will show up. whichever one needs to be there. I like the one that fixes ice cream, so that's pretty good stuff. It's a health food. One of the food groups, dairy, I think.
No other questions?
Okay, so that's a good question. Any questions here? Sangha, Nato?
Is there any reason to read books that you feel you understand, as well as the books that show you that you don't?
I would say as a general response, I would say that would be up to you. I don't really know, because I understand what you're saying, but feel that you understand, feel that you don't. Like, I don't read, and I've read several books of Thich Nhat Hanh's, but I don't resonate with his way of teaching. And the people that do resonate with that are with him and are listening to him and reading his books, and they should be. That's where they're at in their karma, in their life. They need to be. Just like people who are studying with Dalai Lama, or people who are studying Tantra, or studying with Sakya and Nipan. They need to be there. They should be there. They are there. And they need to be there. And in this situation, you're here, and for a while, you're a student of mine. So you should follow, observe what the things that I'm saying to you. So I'm basically saying, study these with Sangha. Don't have to study anything else. But in your case, too, we're have you doing some different practices, like Tara practice. So you're doing that. We're working with your awareness a little bit different way. So, and I do that with everyone. Work with people in lots of different ways. I like to say, I am saying, meet people where they're at. If you meet people where they're at, you'll never miss. You'll never miss. The communication will never go stale or sour or be incorrect. You're right where someone's at. That means there's less of you to consider. You're not so concerned with yourself. You're all about what? Saving all beings. I vow to be with all things. That's what this vow is about. It doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. As long as there's a you, you're going to have a problem with that. When there's no you, then why wouldn't you save all beings? They're not separate from you. You're not separate from anything. People sense this. People know this. The indigenous people have known this. People thousands of years ago knew this, and they all work with it different ways. Whether it's Buddha nature or God or any idea of some kind of transcendence. People sense this. They know that there's something more than just this solidness, but in order to under the solid earth that seems to have time and space and everything all wrapped up and seems so believable. More questions? You don't.
If left to my own devices, I would not read Dan Lusthouse.
Well, of course you would. Well, if left to your own devices, you wouldn't be in here meditating. If left to your own devices. But you got on this path some years ago, and my motivation for having us study Dan Lusthouse is to put my students, the students that consider me their teacher, in right face to face with very, very difficult doctrinal material that explains in detail the way concepts move around in terms of this teaching of the Vijnanavada or the Yogacara practice. And you can also read, if you go in to read Vasubandhu, Stefan Aneker has 7 works of Vasubandhu. It's an extremely good translation. You go in there, you read, that's another area that is really amazing as far as the way concepts can go down into material and break it up into different ways, that if you're willing to follow it, it does give you an understanding of how really complicated this very simple situation is. The simple situation is not separate. Go ahead. Make it a straight question.
I'm really trying. am I studying Dan Lusthouse or am I
No.
studying you?
No, you're studying your mind. No, you're studying your mind. You can't see Dan Lusthouse and you can't see me. All you can see is yourself. That's what you're studying, and I'm helping you. I'm helping you. Reflect on that.
Well, that's why I'm feeling that I don't resonate with Dan Lusthouse. But-
can I say this bluntly? I don't care. You read that. I don't expect you to like. I didn't like doing hundreds of thousands of tantric practices either, but I did them because my teacher said I should do them. I did them anyway, and so I didn't like it, and I don't care for a lot of that practice. Is a very, very grueling practice of spending all of your time just doing tantric practices or creation completion. It's very difficult. I mean, it's interesting because it's exotic and it's colorful, it's flowery, and there's lots of fancy things you can do, different languages and so on. But it's difficult to do that work. Do it anyway. That's what this is. In a sense, I'm saying do this anyway. You follow me?
Yes,
Okay.
what I'm saying, I'm responding to you, not to Dan.
Well, I know.
It's your teaching.
Well, I was responding to Trungpa, not the practice. I'm doing the practice because he told me to do it.
Right.
I don't like it. I wouldn't say I hate it, but I just liked it because it was just, I kept thinking over and over the years, I kept thinking, eventually I'm going to like this. Eventually I'll get what this is, to ring bells and hand drums and chant mantras. And eventually I'll get this. And I did get it. I got that I need to do this. That's what I got. That's what I'm doing. And if someone needs to do that, I can send them to a lama, or if they don't need the lama, I'll teach them how to do it. But I rarely meet someone who needs to do that kind of practice, because usually they're off doing it rather than they're not here. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's just, yeah, it's like and there's some kind of a story, or anecdotal story about someone who's putting more attention on their altar than they are on the teacher. And they said, no, I'm the one you need to be. That's just a bunch of stuff on a table. So, teaching is right here. Same situation. Doesn't make me a wonderful, enlightened being. It just makes your situation very clear, because I'm not separate from you, and I know it. And so therefore, I get to help you. It's about what it's, do you see any discrepancy in what I just said?
Not at all.
No, not at all. Yeah, thank you. Okay, from Thea.
Thea. She asks, how important is it to understand concepts in a practice that is not about information?
You have to start somewhere. You have to start with stair steps. You have to start, not to only descriptive. I don't mean it to judge anyone, but you have to start where you're at. I mean, I think Emma came out with the title of a book called "Start Where You Are." I knew that. Didn't you think I knew that? I know it goes out to listening. Yeah, you have to start where you're at. So some concepts, that's why we have all of the forums and all of the things that we do, so people will come and immerse their mind in it so they can see that they don't really understand it. Seeing that you don't understand it is awareness. And then you start to change your dynamic. The way you relate to your thinking process starts to change. I'm not saying you do away with thinking. We're not trying to do that. But sometimes people get so enamored of their thinking process that they want to use it for everything. They want to figure everything out rather than just see what is true. So I think it's necessary to do some of that. And Thea's come to some book studies. I think you have, Thea. You should come to more of them.
Call in.
Yeah, call in. I know you're out in the boondocks. Is that the end of our sojourn? Okay, so anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We can dedicate the minute.
Don't forget our donation boxes at the back and in the hallway and online and the US mail.
May the miracles penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Sokuzan Shi Shiru Shi Sonu Samokosa SokukoJi, the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.